for coming. This is one of the downsides. I am not even going to for a moment say that we need to do a building project. But this is one of those tough moments where this was simply the date that worked, but this is also when the band is warming up for the next service, so they get the sanctuary. There's no way to do that somewhere else. That's why we are in here. And just for your understanding of kind of process around here, each Sunday morning we do have a slide on the screens out front that is blue, and it says today at St. Luke. And on there it shows the schedule for the morning, and behind everything in parentheses says where it is. So each week, if you're wondering where the adult study is, you can look and it'll say in parentheses youth room or sanctuary or whatever. So those of you who are standing, are you okay? I hate to just, there really are a couple more seats. So those of you who are coming in, come up front.
Another one here.
We can grab some chairs. I don't know if there's somebody who already headed out to do that.
They did.
They did, okay. Yeah, please. There's one right here next to the guy in the red socks. All right. So, Jess and I we want to tell you about the sabbatical. It was something that was just an incredible gift for our whole family. So we thought that Jess came up with this idea. A creative way to do it would be to tell you like the top 15 things we learned on sabbatical with pictures.
Started as the top 10, but I'm from the Big 10, so kind of just bored.
Then it became the Big 11 and the Big 12 and whatever.
But we never changed it. It's the top 10.
It's the top 10. So, so the first, yeah, that's a helpful thing. So the first thing that I wanted to share with you, the very first one, was from my time. It started with a week at St. John's Abbey in Collegeville, Minnesota. And that was a week living with the monks. And that actually began what is now a sermon series called Monk Habits for Everyday People, which we started today. Those of you who were in the 8 o'clock service, all right, there are chairs coming in, so just stack them up back here. Though I'm going to just keep going so that we don't get too off track. So this is the sanctuary at St. John's Abbey, and back here are some of the rows where the monks sit. And so 3 times a day I would gather for worship. And it was just heavenly. I now want this for everybody I love. I don't know if going and hanging out with monks for a week even appeals to Jessica, but I came back and I was like, yeah. But like, I was like, you gotta go. Or you gotta go somewhere. We gotta just give you a week to go read the books you've been wanting to read and be still and hike. There were bike paths. I read 4 books that week alone. So that was really a great experience. This is the first thing I learned, is that monks are real people. So I mentioned this morning the 8 o'clock service, I'll mention it later. This is one of the gentlemen who really, one of the monks at St. John's Abbey, who was very kind to me. He was age 40 when he became a monk, and his profession before that was circus ringmaster. And so these are pictures from his Facebook account of him in his monk robes breathing fire. Monks are real people. They're down to earth, they're funny, some of them are strange. What he said to me is, he said actually working in the circus was good preparation for living in the monastery because the monastery is kind of a circus. And the way he said it was, he said there are short ones, tall ones, skinny ones, fat ones, and some of them you just have to call freaks. I thought it was just great. So that's the first thing I learned, is that monks are real people. The second thing we kind of combined that we learned is that horses have gas, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Do you want to tell either of these stories?
Oh, yeah. So this was visiting. I have an aunt. My father's brother was an entomologist and traveled all over the world, and was in Pakistan and in parts of Africa, and his wife is very eclectic. She grew up on the East Coast as a Jew and a Catholic, and and so she loves art, and she was the only person who bid on this lovely piece of art that was 3D. And she couldn't understand why she was the only person that bid on it. It was so beautiful. And she would have paid more for it, but she was the only person that bid on it, so she won it. But it kind of stared at you wherever you were in her house. She lives in Jackson, Wyoming, and so after our time in Yellowstone, we drove to Jackson and stayed with her for a few days with my parents. And it was quite an interesting experience because my aunt is very East Coast and like very, very intense. And she hikes every day. She's 85. She hikes every day. And so she just didn't know what to do with my mother, who doesn't hike every day. Every day she would say, Cheryl, I just don't know what to do with you. You don't hike. What are you going to do out here? Why are you here? You just don't hike. You don't hike. Every day my mother woke up with this.
The other fun one there, I'll just interject, was that she could not understand how pastors' children didn't say bless you when other people sneezed. And it was very much, the Jess just did a really good impression, like, they're raised around this stuff all the time. Why wouldn't they say bless you? Why don't your children say bless you? And it's like,
Who's the person on the horse? Certainly not 85.
That is Lucas on the horse. So we went on a horseback riding trip through the Grand Tetons with my father, which was really, really special. And my dad was in the very back of because you go single file when you're like going through the mountains. And my horse was second to last, and his name was Dale. And he farted the entire trip. 2 hours. Literally like every 30 seconds to 90 seconds. And so,
He had a good digestive system.
he did, yes. So I hope there's no one named Dale in here. I apologize. It's now a name in our family that if you Daled, that's a light word for farted. But
So there you go.
Lucas loved it.
Yeah.
He loved it when the horses farted. He loved it when they peed. He loved it when they pooped. It was very exciting. It was more exciting than the mountains.
I am guessing these are not the stories you thought you were going to but this is good. It was really intentional for us to, to share some of the funny things too. So, the next, technology's going to fail me. Here, I think I'm all cool controlling the thing with my watch. Now it's not going to work.
Hold on.
Guess
Come
you need
on.
a new watch.
So could we invite your aunt to the music fest next time for the silent auction?
Oh my goodness. She would have some very interesting pieces.
Yes, indeed.
They collected a lot of stuff over the years.
So the third thing we learned on sabbatical is that you never know what you'll find. Do you want to tell about this day, Jess? It was such a-
Sure. So, I remember what we picked.
Just the pictures of us climbing on the rocks. And
So this is in Custer State Park. We had rented a little cabin in Custer State Park, and it's a great park to stay in. It was a little cabin that had enough for 5 people to sleep in, air conditioning. It was great.
It's
Right
amazing.
next to the restroom. Restrooms are very clean. And we stayed there for 4 nights actually. We at Custer we went to Mount Rushmore and showed the kids Mount Rushmore and spent the entire day there. We got
to see, at Mount Rushmore, we got to see a naturalization ceremony. They do, when people are taking their pledges to become citizens of this country, they do them in some various places. And they told us that day was the largest group they had ever had of people taking the pledge to become citizens of the country. It was beautiful. Right there at the base of Mount Rushmore. It's incredible.
And so then we got into a conversation with the kids about why would immigrants be coming to this place? And Mount Rushmore was actually created by an immigrant who loved his country so much and loved the fact that he became an American citizen, that he created this beautiful sculpture that now is a place that millions of people come to visit every year. So in the larger picture of what's going on in the national news, it was quite interesting to talk to our kids about immigration from a different point of view. And then we also stayed that night to watch the lights go on and watch them honor the military and bring down all the military. So it was a pretty special day. And then we also went to Wind Cave and National Cave around there. And then this was our hiking day. We took 3 hiking trips that day. The kids got camel backpacks from Santa for Christmas, and we all had our camel packs, and we just trekked along. And we didn't really have any destination in mind. We just woke up that day and said, well, what are we going to hike that day? And so This one was Little Devil's Tower that we hiked, and it was supposed to be like 1.5 miles, but it was a tough 1.5 miles, let me tell you. And
It was like straight up, it was like rock climbing.
The kids rocked it, and the reason we said you'll never know what you'll find is along this hike, Carissa got a selfie stick, a brand new selfie stick. She was very proud of her selfie stick. She pulled it out of her backpack, and she had lost the screw and the nut on our hike. We went, oh.
And much trouble.
Yes, tears. Oh, bad. How are we gonna solve this? We said it's fine. Let's start. Let's start tracing our path. We found the nut and the bolt.
Oh, goodness.
By tracing our path in the middle of all of these rocks and dirt and grass and leaves. And we were like, yes, this is the best day ever! All because we found a selfie stick and made it whole again. So then we kept on hiking, and we were really tired, and we were making this trip as affordable as possible, and I had a crock pot thing that we were going to do back at the camp. And my children were like, yay, crock pot, and quinoa and beans and tomatoes, sounds great. What are we gonna have next? I said, that's it, that's what we got, we're gonna make do. Well, along this route, we start meeting another family of 4. And we're talking to them, and the dad is terrified. He's terrified of heights. He's a firefighter from Waukesha. And they start telling us about this place just a little bit north of Custer, where they're going to go and have filet mignon for $11.99. And you get Texas toast and a salad and potato and like
it was
everything.
A supper club.
Yeah,
it was a supper club, and that was it. You could go in and order the filet mignon.
Yeah.
And
so as we're hiking,
$12 though.
as we're hiking, Matt's like, that sounds really good.
That sounds really good.
he's like, steak sounds really good. And so after that, I'm like, fine, let's ditch the crock pot, let's go for the steak. He was a very happy boy.
Amazing.
Yeah, and we even had a beer that night. So we said, you never know what you'll find, because that was just truly a great day. The kids jumped on rocks, and we had no idea that day what we were going to travel on or what roads we'd be on or who we'd meet. And everyone was so friendly. We met a family from Waukesha. We had a great dinner.
That was really an incredible thing. So the other thing that we learned was that the kids only fight at home. We now want to sell our house and live out of our minivan or buy a motorhome, because it was insanity. This was a 2-week trip that we went out to Yellowstone, and we're doing this in order. So I spent a week at the monastery, came home, had like 24 hours or less between when I arrived back home and we left, so Jess had packed most of the trip for us. Then we were 2 weeks, Yellowstone, Grand Tetons, back through South Dakota, Custer, all of that. Badlands. They were great. There was no bickering, no fighting. So any of you who have children, just take them on the road. Or at least it worked for us. Another thing we learned?
Yes.
This is what Jess and Carissa learned.
Life is a beach. So we got back from our great trip out west at noon on Tuesday. Got Carissa to her first baritone lesson by 12:20, and got Matt to the airport by 5 o'clock that night to go to France. My mother is still having heart murmurs from this day.
She was so nervous we weren't going to make it.
Very nervous. But while Matt was in France, and he can speak about that because he will just put you to sleep. If you ever want to know about France, no, I'm sorry. He will tell you about France and Taizé, because that was definitely the highlight for him. For Carissa and I, we got to have our first girl trip, which was really, really special. And if you see her now with her elbow brace, she's had a gymnastics injury, and she has to have surgery. And she's out of gymnastics now for this year and possibly for longer. So this wound up being a really special trip that we got to go to national gymnastics. That was the reason we went to California, was to go to national gymnastics for the YMCA. We stayed at an Airbnb in Long Beach. We bought our rollerblades, and every day, we were there for a whole week. So we stayed at this Airbnb for like $60 a night. If you've never done Airbnb, highly recommend it. We went to the grocery store, we bought all of our food, so it was very affordable. And then we brought our rollerblades and we would park our car, find free parking, drop a pin on our phone, and then we would just rollerblade to a new beach each day. So we went to Venice Beach, which was quite interesting for her. Her eyes have been opened to the diversity of the world. That was the first day, and then I think every other beach was like a letdown. She was like, well, this isn't as interesting. So we went to Venice Beach, we went to Seal Beach, which was really fun. We went to Long Beach, of course, and then this was at Santa Monica, the Santa Monica Pier, and this is like the original like Muscle Beach, the gymnastics beach, where they've got these rings, and here are like these big like buff men like doing all of these like gymnastics sorts of moves. And these like huge guys that are like going on these rings that are like, there's like maybe 10 rings across the sand, and they just swing from them. And they go across, and they're just taking turns going across and building their strength. Here comes Carissa, little 4'10". She's, I'm gonna go along too. She gets in line with all these men, and no fear, and she makes it through a couple, and can't quite make it any further, but gets back in line, does it again. She just loved it. I couldn't get her away from the beach. So she had a really good time. So that was really fun.
So while they were in California at the National Gymnastics Tournament, that's when I was at Taizé, which was truly the highlight of the whole thing. When you go there, you get paired with a group, and one thing I realized is that this place is primarily a youth movement. I knew that, but I had never felt like just how old you are at age 37. I don't normally feel old at 37. But there you show up and most people are 18 to 24. And like thousands and thousands of them, and they all camp out in these big fields. You see these fields and there's just tents everywhere. And then 3 times a day they ring the bells, and 3, 4, 5,000, our week was about 3,000. Their big weeks are more like 5. 3,000 people, most of them young adults, would pack into this cavernous sanctuary and sing songs like what we sang today. It was incredible. I was up in the geriatric section, because when I showed up and they were like, oh, you're 37, you're up in the adult section. And what you do is you get paired with a group for the week that you do Bible studies, and twice a day, once a day, one of the brothers comes up and leads a Bible study with you, and then you break into your small groups. We would meet with our small groups twice a day. This kind of goes back to you never know what you'll find. Probably one of the greatest gifts of the sabbatical was realizing, and this is going to sound strange, but when some of you may understand this, when so much of your identity is wrapped around what you produce for other people, it is incredibly refreshing to find out that I met these people from all over the world. I was not their husband, their father, or their pastor. I was just Matt. And that was good enough. And that was huge for me. So honestly, this group of people was an incredible gift to me, and they're from all over the country. There's only one other woman from the United States. Not very many people there from the United States. I was with so this woman here was a social worker from England. The one behind her was from the United States. He was from Sweden. This was an Italian monk who came for the week. This guy's a German musician, a German school teacher. She was a Swedish social worker. She was an artist from the UK and a German school teacher. I can't remember what she did for a living. She was from Germany. Fascinating group of people. So one of the things I learned is that Christ is everywhere, truly everywhere, and around the world. He's just such a gift.
Do you have any language problems?
No, what they did is they paired us together with everybody who could speak English. The default there is English now, because it's a language that a lot of people in Europe speak. The crazy part was doing Bible studies. The brother would speak in short sentences in English, and for anybody who didn't know English, then they would have translators. And so he would say, like we studied the parable of the Good Samaritan, the father looks like a goofball running to his son. That's all I'd say. And then you'd hear this rush of translation, because people would be packed around one person who could translate it into their language. It was really beautiful. That's a glimpse of what that sanctuary looks like full. You can't get a picture of it. They have all these garage doors that roll up, and so when it's a small crowd, they leave the garage doors down, and it sections off, and then as the crowd gets bigger, they open up more and more sections. This is from the very back, but they told me that our week was a small week at 3,000. 5,000 or 6,000 is about their max.
This is a church.
It is. It's a massive cathedral. And talk about, this is something we're going to be talking about with our council. Brother Roger, the guy who started the Tizay community, used to talk about the dynamic of the provisional. So every time they would be faced with a really difficult problem, like all of a sudden thousands of people are showing up, and it's just this little band of monks. They don't know why. They were trying to reach out to youth, but they didn't know it was going to explode like this. They had just built this new sanctuary, and they ripped the front of it off and just put a big circus tent out in front of it. Because a year after they built the new sanctuary, this is back in the 60s, there were thousands of people coming and they couldn't fit it all. So their brand new building, they took the front of it off and put in these garage doors. Because Brother Roger, the guy who started it, talked about how every decision is provisional. Like we can only decide on what we know right now, so let's do something. Let's make a decision, let's move forward one step, and maybe next year that's going to change. And I thought that was just such a healthy view of leadership. So
You can talk about the food.
the food was amazing. I'll probably talk about that more. The problem is I could fill this entire time with stories from Tizay. The food was great. We ate like monks too. So 3 times a day, breakfast was bread and water. Because when you're feeding 5,000 people, it's a group of like 100 brothers. And you can kind of see all the white right here. They have these little tiny potted hedges. And the brothers sit in this little hedged-in area right in the center. And then thousands of people are drawn to them. I actually think it's a really beautiful image for what we're called to be as Christians, is that we stay focused on the cross, and that draws others to us. I mean, these guys don't do anything special, and thousands of young people come to sing with them. So then you have the logistical challenges of how do you feed that many people? They take donations, and they sell their art, they sell these little crosses, and whatever they make just goes back into supporting the community. So food is really interesting. Bread and water, and little chocolate bars for breakfast. So you would stick these little tiny chocolate bars in your bread, and butter if you wanted it. Then lunch and dinner were both some sort of big stew pot of something where you'd get a scoop of it. Sometimes it was potatoes. There was one meal that was just mashed potatoes. I thought that was pretty great. But unfortunately, I gained weight the rest of the summer, and I didn't lose enough that week to get rid of it. But and then I had 4 days in Paris that were unstructured and just beautiful. The guy that I stayed with was incredible. I did Airbnb as well, so instead of a hotel, I stayed with this old Parisian man who lives right downtown. I was a 5-minute walk from Notre Dame. And every night he would wait up for me. Everyone there chain smokes constantly. And so he would sit up, he was sitting by the window, chain smoking. I'd come in at 11 o'clock. He'd still be up smoking, reading the paper, and then he'd open a bottle of wine and ask me to tell him about my day. It's the realization that all around the world there are incredible people. And you'll find them. God is that good that there are incredible people all over, and if you open yourself up to it, you'll find them. So that really was, I could tell you so many stories, but the other thing that I bring back from Tizay, this is where I sat. You saw the depth of that last picture. I tended to sit up closer. Here's the hedge. I sat right around here because I could hear the voices of the brothers, and that helped me learn the songs. So that's kind of the spot I sat most nights. And really, the other thing I learned is the core of the sermon today. When you stop, you find a sense of peace. You find Christ within. It's not just all these things that we can do, or I better get to church so that I can, find a sense of peace. That is with us always. If we're quiet long
music
enough.
classes?
Yes, every single day. At 2 o'clock every day you could go in and learn the parts. And so I know the bass parts to a lot of these songs. And if we start to use them a little bit more here, we're going to start breaking those out. Our Crossroads Band, that's what we're calling it now. The Crossroads Band that's warming up right now in the sanctuary for the 10:30 service was kind enough to learn all of the parts of the Alleluia that we sang at 8 o'clock. And so at the 10:30 service, that's going to be in full 4-part harmony. So that's going to be really good. All right, another thing we learned is that getting goosed is a good thing. We went to this thing called the Wild Goose Festival. We've got a picture up here of Shane Claiborne and Pato. So, do you want to share your thoughts about the Wild Goose Festival?
Anybody ever heard of Wild Goose before? Yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I may have heard of it a couple of times.
The 2 church workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So It's like Woodstock for Christians.
Yeah.
So Matt told me about this, and I've heard about it from colleagues that he said, we're going to go, we're going to camp, it'll be fun. I'm like, okay, I can camp, no problem.
We love camping.
Yeah, we love camping. I love music. It's about spirituality, justice, music, and art. So think about those 4 things, and then you're camping the entire time. I can do all those. So we got there, and it's in Hot Springs, North Carolina.
Which
it's hot.
Appropriately named.
Very, very hot. Hot. I've never camped in the South before in July. It's hot. And so we bring our tent, and not all of our air mattresses fit in there, which we, because the kids now demand air mattresses. Before they were not as high maintenance as I am. And so you have to like bring everything in. So there's a point at which the cars are no longer allowed in there. So we got everything in. We had the cars to get our air mattresses all blown up, and then had everything fit. And we were like, oh no. So sleeping was interesting.
I slept on the floor the first night, which is fine.
Yeah, and there are 3,500 people, 4 showers, people. 4 showers. 4 showers. The 3rd day, I finally said, Matt, I don't care how much of this festival I miss, I'm taking a shower. I didn't have to wait at all. I think everyone just assumed they're going to be hot, stinky, and sweaty. But I finally had to break down. I come to find out that there are cabins there and other places where you can sleep, and Matt is like, well, we're just trying to do it as affordably as possible.
So we might go back, because the other crazy part about it, this is like it's not just music. There are speakers all day long, and so it's kind of like a continuing education event, but bigger. So you get this packet of information, and every day there are, I don't know how many different tents do you think there were? There were probably 20, 25 different tents. One called the Justice tent, one called the Peace tent, one called the whatever tent, right? And then there was this huge grid. At 9 o'clock in the Justice tent, this person's speaking. At 11:30 in the whatever tent, the guys who started their own brewery from a church are, and then there are some big names like Shane Claiborne. And so it was really, really fascinating. We could plan our entire day around who we wanted to hear. It was really tough to not have a laptop because there were so many notes I wanted to take. And this is on my list of continuing education events I would like to do in the future, though we may be doing it in the cabin.
And this is open for anyone. You don't have to be a pastor. I would highly encourage you to go. You can bring your trailer or your pop-up. You don't have to go in a tent. They have cabins. There's hotel rooms to rent if you're not a tenter. But it is an amazing experience. It's very hard to really articulate in words. Our children loved it. It was a very community-based experience. So our kids, we had walkie-talkies, and they would just go and play, and they found other kids, and we shared food, and people would come by. They're like, we're from Texas, and we got our, they had their food, and we were sharing our food, and
people
so
walking down the way with a watermelon they'd cut up and they couldn't eat it all, just walking past the campsites going, watermelon, come on, help us finish this,
So if you want your kids or your grandkids to know what it's like to live in a Christian community, truly live in that free, spirit of the Holy Spirit was present the entire time. It was amazing. It was really cool. There was music every night. The Indigo Girls were there. This was reggae one night, Christian reggae.
Yeah, Christian reggae. And so he dragged kids up on stage. He said, any kids who will come up and dance, I'll give you one of my CDs for free. Carissa likes dancing. Lucas does not. We need to let them in. Can you guys even hear us? You can't even hear us.
What?
You can't even hear us. Okay, at least prop the door open so they can hear us. So great. I just see Chris Bailey. Oh. So
It's understandable.
Right. So Carissa loves dancing. That was pretty likely. Lucas loves free stuff. So this is one of the promotional pictures now for the event. This Christian reggae guy. His songs were totally wholesome and beautiful. And there's Chris and Lucas up on stage. It was just hilarious. And really, it gave our kids, I think, a completely different snapshot of what it means to be a Christian, because they saw 3,000 people sharing food, singing different kinds of music. They just had a blast. And I think it's a little bit like camp, where they came away going, wow, the Christian world is bigger. They wouldn't articulate it this way, but I think that's part of what it did for them, was there's lots of different ways to be a Christian, and we can all work together. It was really incredible. So I plan on going back in future years. I don't know if next summer, did we decide it's at the same time?
So next summer I'm on sabbatical, and the same weekend that it's at is my Ironman, a half Ironman.
So I'm not going to be
you
going
can
next
go.
year. Well,
you
we'll
can
see.
take the kids.
We'll
but
see.
I'm busy.
We'll see. We might be there to cheer you on. We're going to figure that out. So.
Yeah. The other really cool thing, I'll give you one other example of how different this sort of experience was. There was a red tent there for women and girls, and so they had a special time for my daughter's in 6th grade, and so she's starting to go through those changes, and so they had an invitation for mothers and daughters of this age going through puberty and starting to have those changes, and so we walked into the red tent and we received a blessing, and the way we introduced ourselves was we had to say our name. I am Jessica, daughter of Cheryl, who is daughter of Maxine, who is daughter of Lillian. So we went through the matriarchy side instead of the patriarchy side. And to see the women in there, I mean, we wept together as we got to just share that part of our history. And the girls in there going, wait, now, who's my grandma? Wait, which grandma is your mom? Because they didn't know that, and so that right there was a teaching moment. And so teaching about our bodies is not a place of shame, but as a holy thing, and was just a really neat experience. And Carissa walked away from it. She's the one that wanted to go with me, and I was like, well, here we go. It's gonna be interesting. And she loved it. And really enjoyed it. So I mean, just that sort of just very different way of thinking about spirituality was a gift.
Yeah. So that is going to be on my short list for continuing it that I do in the future, and that some of you, if you want to come with me, you would love it. It was really an incredible thing. So we may do it as a family again. I might do it with the kids. The kids will probably want to come with me either way because it was pretty incredible. Just a funny little thing, quick. At the end of the night, each night, they had this thing called the silent disco. And for a couple nights, we were like, what is that? So we finally went to it. I took the kids one night while Jess was trying to shower or sleep or something. Or just not be hot. But you walked into this big tent, and there were like 100 pairs of wireless headphones. And there was a DJ up front. And it looked so stupid. Because here it is in the middle of the night, there are local noise ordinances, right? It was like a club that you only heard in your wireless headphones. So when you walk up to it, it's dead silent, and people dancing. And it was just dead silent. And then you put it on, and when you put it on, you can hear the voice of the DJ, you can hear the music rocking, and then you're dancing and sweating buckets, and it was just incredible. The kids loved it, absolutely loved it. So they want to go back just to do the silent disco again.
And the Episcopalians rocked it with beer and hymns.
Yeah.
Happy hour, and at like 11 o'clock, they would just get out their guitars and their drums, and they had their little gators with kegs on them, and they were just rocking it. So
we don't have this problem, but in a lot of churches, and we could do better here too. A lot of churches, the 20-somethings are absent. They're at Wild Goose. I mean, it was incredible. There are tons of people in their 20s who think that being a Christian is a good thing and that it can make a difference in the world, and it was incredible. And they particularly liked the beer and hymns. We're singing "How Great Thou Art" with a beer in our hand, and it was very fun. So, all right.
You want to keep your voice up instead of down?
Should I?
So
what was that?
Keep the volume up instead of dropping it down.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll yell a little bit more. Thank you. Yeah, because you can kind of not hear from the hallway.
Well, even before that.
So, one thing that we learned is that kids like touching history. After Wild Goose, because we were in the South, we went down to visit Jess's aunt and uncle who live in Savannah, Georgia, just outside of Savannah, Georgia. That was really a great time. Is there anything you want to share from that, or do you want to tell us about the church?
Anyone read Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil?
Yes.
Yeah. The Landings. Do you remember reading about the Landings? No? Okay, well that's where my aunt and uncle retired to. It's Skidaway Island. There's 7 golf courses on the island, and that's where they live. So they have a good life.
So going from eating bread and water for breakfast, then we were sweating our butts off and eating shared watermelon, to just the lap of luxury.
To a gated community.
Oh my gosh. It was actually really stark. It was a really stark difference.
But they are also, there's a church there, it's a very wonderful place.
We met their pastor.
Yeah.
Really great guy.
But so we stayed with them for a few days, and Savannah, Georgia has a lot of history, a lot of really, really interesting history. If you ever go down to Savannah, take a trolley tour and learn about all of the history down there. One of the things that is not on the trolley tour, but I would highly encourage you to go to is the First Baptist African American Church. This is a church that was built by slaves. It's a church where the slave owners allowed the slaves, once their work was done, to go and build this church. And so it's the oldest African American church on record. They also used it as an escape route. It was one of the starting points of the Underground Railroad. So you'll see these holes
In the floor, that's in the basement.
Floor. They would hide slaves down underneath, and that was the only air that they would be able to breathe. And then in the evening, when the time was right, they had built a tunnel underneath the river, and they would send them through the tunnel and put them on their way north. It was also used by soldiers, because the tunnel was actually very large underneath the river. It was also used by soldiers as well for military use too. And so it was really interesting to see this piece of history and to show the kids about the ways in which Christianity was a revolution, that it was a means of freedom for these slaves, that they used the Christianity that was oppressive on them and turned it on its head and used it as a way of freedom for their own families and their own community. And it was really powerful.
This is a little bit different than learning about the Underground Railroad in a book. When they got to see the holes in the floor, and you could see like the crawl space underneath, it was not big. You just think of people being crammed in under there, hoping that they could make it north to be free. It just blows my mind. So that was a really, really neat thing. We learned that kids can be braver than the adults. Part of our time with her aunt and uncle is they took us on their boat out to this little island out in the middle of nowhere, and when we had to drop anchor and we were going to have to walk the rest of the way up the beach, we saw 8 million stingrays all around us. And both Jess and I were like,
Boat time's over, let's go.
positive that we really want to get in the water. And Jess's aunt was like, it's no big deal, just shuffle your feet. If you just shuffle your feet through the sand, then it scares them away and they won't come up and sting you and you'll die. And so the children were like, okay, and the kids hopped in. Literally, Jess was following Lucas. Because Lucas was shuffling his feet, and he's like, okay, that's what Aunt Peggy told me to do. And we were fine. But it was kind of bizarre playing in the surf, knowing that we were surrounded by stingrays. I mean, we walked along the beach for a little while that day, and you just saw hundreds of them. When the tide would come back out, you'd see them pop back up, and they all have that little stinger tail, and Jess and I were not super excited about that.
They were fishing for crab.
They were fishing for, yeah, they really liked the horseshoe crab.
Yeah.
We found a horseshoe crab shell.
And the blue crab.
And the blue crab, that was great. For me, one of the things I learned this summer that staying connected to place is important. So when we got back from our time down in Georgia, then things slowed down a little bit. We had the first part of the summer was crazy. The second part of the summer was a little bit quieter. Carissa had a week of gymnastics camp. Jess stayed home. I took Lucas out to our family hunting cabin in Michigan. That's the table that tons of family gatherings have happened around. You're pretty much seeing the square footage of the cabin in that picture. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a perfect double pine tree on that property. I've told you about this before. Back in 2011 or 12 or something, that year both my grandfather and my uncle had died, and that's the tree where we place everybody's ashes. My grandmother died years and years ago, and she wanted to be placed at the base of the double pine tree. Both my uncle and my grandpa, we placed their ashes there. That's where I want to go. We learned something sad this year. There is it's like a form of Dutch elm, but it's what attacks pine trees, and that tree is now dead. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off probably about 10 feet up to preserve the Y, and then put a plaque on there or something. So, but for me, I actually got to go back a second time. I spent most of August, 2 different week-long or a little bit longer than that trips. And Lucas went with me both times. The second time we were all supposed to go, but Carissa really wanted to try and get to the next level in gymnastics, and so Jess stayed home with her. And it's probably that week that some of the damage was done to her elbow because she was pushing so hard, and now gymnastics might be, a little bit of a, yeah. So, but it was really an incredible opportunity to be there. Another thing I learned is that the church does amazing work in the world. So between my 2 trips to Michigan, I got to go represent the Greater Milwaukee Synod as a representative at the National Assembly. So I got to see what the ELCA looks like on a grand scale. They only gather once every 3 years, and I'm not going to spend much time on this because a week from today, that's what we're going to be doing as the adult Bible study option for the next couple months. Is basically I'm going to show you videos. We're going to look at things we talked about. You can look at decisions that were made. We can talk about that. You can ask about it. We're going to basically do a virtual version of the National Assembly starting next week in between services. But it was really incredible to be in a room with thousands and thousands of Lutherans from all over the world and hear statistics like this. You expect impressive things from a large church, right? I mean, because we can do some really big stuff together. But when they got up and told us that the malaria campaign that the ELCA has undertaken in coordination with tons of other agencies, this was a coordinated effort with tons of other agencies around the world to try to funnel as much money as possible toward trying to eradicate malaria or bring it to really low levels in Africa. Very simple things. Anti-malarial drugs are cheap and they save lives. Nets keep people from being bit and being infected. You don't expect to hear statistics like this. Somebody stood up and said that combined effort over the last 6 years have cut malaria deaths in Africa in half. And you just don't expect like a clear-cut statistic like that. And we said, wait, in half? Yes, in half. Half as many people die now in Africa from malaria because of some of the dollars that you put in the plate here get funneled onto our bishop's office, they go on to the national church, and the national church does that. And it was really incredible. And new infections have been cut in like 40%. So we'll learn about all of that. We also had a great joint statement with the Catholic Church. 37 things that we no longer disagree on. There were representatives from the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops. You also don't expect clear statements like this. Somebody raised their hand and said, does this agreement, or this steps towards an agreement, move us closer to sharing communion together? And you expect kind of a politician's answer. Well, the priest from Georgetown, who was on this group, stood up and said, yes. And we went, wait, what? He said, yeah, no, this document moves us a step closer to being able to share communion together. Really? He said, yeah, some of my Catholic colleagues might not be happy with me saying that, but I absolutely believe it does. So we'll talk lots more about that in the coming weeks. Another thing we learned, we are a good foursome. So you've got the 4 heads in the background and the 4 heads in the foreground. We just learned that when we actually take time for family, the 4 of us are a good team. I don't know how better to say that. Is there anything you want to throw into that?
Well, yeah. One of the reasons Matt and I met was because when we were in seminary, one of my decisions for going to Trinity was because I had traveled and studied in Venezuela and spoke Spanish, and it was on my bucket list to go to Cuba. And they, at Trinity, led a J-term trip every other year to Cuba. So when I heard that, I said, all right, I'm going to Trinity. I'm going to go to Cuba. And I was all signed up for my second year to go to Cuba, and that was Matt's first year. And
I had also signed up for the
He had
trip.
signed up as well. We hadn't really met yet. And then 9/11 happened, and they canceled all international travel for all the seminaries. And so Matt and I had just met. We were friends at this point, but we had decided, well, can't travel outside the United States, let's travel inside the United States. And we, with 2 other friends, made a 3-week-long trip to Holden Village in Seattle, and had a great time. And we really enjoyed traveling together, and that's really what bonded us. And we've given that travel bug to our kids. They travel really well together. there is just not a lot of drama. There's not a lot of meltdowns. There's not bickering. They enjoy, you know, kind of variety of trips in the past few years, and they have just enjoyed every moment of them. Whether it's going to DC or on a Disney cruise or camping or taking them to Wild Goose, which they were like, what is this? They have enjoyed it, and we have enjoyed it. And so, so as you know, traveling has bonded Matt and I together, it's also bonded the four of us together.
And to be clear, it was really good for us to get the chance to travel together again. You know, it really reminded us of some of those things from early on that were important to just the two of us too.
Yeah,
so
because,
maybe I should change this. So we are a good foursome. We're a pretty good twosome too.
because a lot of our time now that we live here is traveling to see family. We spend a lot of our vacation time visiting family. So
And that's
it was
just
nice.
that's just the shadow side of being pastors, and you follow the call to wherever it is. And that doesn't mean a lot of people here live within driving distance of grandma and grandpa. Maybe they're, you know, and we've just never had that. So all of our vacation time we use to go be with grandma and grandpa wherever they are. So this was great to take time for just the four of us instead of just trying to be with other family members. All right, this one I'll talk more about in the weeks, months, and years ahead. I really came to a deep place of understanding that I am called to be your pastor, not your CEO. There are lots of bizarre tasks that fall on my plate, and that's okay, and we can talk more about this later. But I really believe that this is a picture of where St. John's Abbey, this is one of the hikes I would take every day. And there's a lot behind this that there's not time to get into now. But some of you may have noticed that I've started doing daily devotions every morning. That's essential for my soul. I was so focused before on producing, and every time something changes around here, we try to tell volunteers that it's really important for them to have the freedom to say, I'm tired, I don't want to do that thing anymore. And we want to say, absolutely, thank you for, don't burn yourself out. Things can stop. We have not been great at this church about pruning. We have continued to grow and grow and grow in not just in numbers, but in the stuff we do. And we haven't trimmed very much of it away. We haven't taken old programs that we've been doing for 20 years and said, you know, we don't have to do that anymore. And so part of my sense is I want to come back and almost declare a sabbatical for the church. And to say it is okay if you're a volunteer and you're feeling overworked to say no. And then for us as a group to understand it is okay for some of those things to stop. I had a dilemma this week. The person who usually creates the PowerPoint presentation for our 10:30 service, which definitely uses the screens, she has an issue with her foot. She's got all sorts of other stuff going on. She said, I can't do it this week. And so who was going to do it? We hadn't trained anybody else to do it. So at 11:30 last night, I was finishing the slideshow. I was really tempted to almost not have a slideshow for today. And I probably should have done that. Simply to say, it's okay that it's not perfect. Part of that's my learning, and part of that's our learning as a group. That it's okay for things to not happen, and we don't have to look for someone to blame. I am going to try and be centered as your pastor, centered in the scriptures, centered in worship, do as many other things as I can, but I was really, really near whatever that word is, if it's burnout, or if it's just complete exhaustion, because I love this church, and I love the people here, but I have really overfunctioned a lot in the last 8 years. There are times where I'm a creative gap filler, so if I see a gap, we didn't have a website, so I made one. I really thought we should have an app, so we have one. I try and find these other things to bring up the quality of what we can offer, but I was really killing myself doing that. So I'm going to try and just stay a lot more centered in my task as your pastor. To be there for people when they need to talk and pray with me, to be centered in the scripture and centered in worship. And then anything on top of that is kind of bonus, but those are the things that have to come first. So now my very first thing I do every day, regardless of whether the website's broken, there's not a PowerPoint presentation, we don't have enough Sunday school teachers, whatever it is, the first thing is scripture. And that's actually something I'm going to be working with the staff on too, that we as a staff are grounded in scripture, because that pathology of mine and that pathology of this church's rubs off on the staff as well. So sometimes they're kind of frantic just trying to 20 things at once because there's so much to do, and I want to give them permission to let a few things stop, because it turns out, you know, lots of you know I was kind of doing the work of 2 people before. A lot of our staff are in a similar position. If you ever watch Michelle, she is doing 20 things at all times, and really the same could be said for anyone. We want to be careful not to do that to Marie. She's brand new here. We don't want to, you know, burn her out that quickly. So this is a big one, and we're gonna talk lots more about that.
Yeah.
I have a real quick comment. There are a number of people in this room that live as I do at Cedar Community in West Bend, and our new CEO does not call himself a CEO. He calls himself the coach of an excellent organization.
I love it. I love it. The coach of an excellent organization. I am gonna steal that. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because truly the way the Spirit moves in this place is the gift of this church. And the way the Spirit moves through you all, that is the gift of this church. And one thing we've got to continuously be careful about is not letting it focus too much on one person. I have been guilty of that, and to be honest, and a little challenging, some of you have been guilty of this too. When you come up to me and you say, "Oh, Pastor, that sermon was great, that's the reason I come to this church." Nah, I'm going to push back at you really hard when you say stuff like that. Or like some people said to me, honestly, "We didn't come this summer because you weren't here." No, because this absolutely needs to not be about me. That puts too much focus on me. It takes the focus off of God. It puts too much pressure on me, and it puts too much pressure on you. We are here because we've been called together by a God who does amazing things in the world, and He does them through you. And I just get the honor of being the coach of an excellent organization. Man, I love that. This is the last thing we want to say. Simply how deeply grateful we are.
Thank you.
I don't.
Jessica, at our going away luncheon, you made a comment that hit me, and I hope it was successful. But you hope that your quality of pillow talk would improve. No
Yeah.
comments.
That's a term process, right? So, yeah, I think things are going well. You know, I see what I see in Matt now, the presence that he has now. I don't know if you have noticed a difference, but he is more relaxed. He is more, I told him on our anniversary, he is more himself. His job was truly breaking him down. And he wasn't who he was for the past couple of years. And I was truly afraid of him. And I was afraid for our marriage and our kids. You know, there's no easy fix to that. It's not like a sabbatical fixes that. I think that we all face these. Just because we're pastors doesn't mean that we have any different challenges than you all in your jobs, and how to find balance in trying to hold a family and hold a job and hold a marriage, and balance those, because balance is, it's this myth that again we're trying to hold ourselves up to, that we can do all of these things, and what we got this summer was something that was imbalanced. It really got to put our family first. I don't know if it put our marriage first, because we were with our 4 kids, our 2 kids the entire time. So,
But actually, we've taken a lot of steps, even in the last couple months, last month, to put our marriage first again. And I think that I feel more like myself now, and I hope that makes me a better pastor, a better father, and certainly a better partner. And she's my accountability partner on that, so if she starts to see some of that be out of whack again, her job is to smack me upside the head. Like the nights where it feels like I'm on a hamster wheel here all day. When I come home and what we talk about, what the pillow talk is, oh man, this thing broke today and this volunteer stepped down and I don't know how that's going to happen and these people are mad about this thing or that thing and that's exhausting pillow talk. And the other side of it is the pillow talk about all the challenges that Jess faces at Marquette, and we just, we have to take time for us again. And this gave us a chance to reignite some of that, so.
So, we're getting there. Thank you. Yeah. To be continued.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. We are with that, you have to go pick up your children from Sunday school, and I have